At St. Mercy Hospital, the night shift carried its usual weight of silence. The sterile tang of disinfectant hung in the air, while the harsh glow of fluorescent lights stretched endlessly over polished tiles. The only sounds breaking through were the steady beep of monitors and the muted tapping of a keyboard. Nurse Isabella Carter was used to the lonely rhythm of late hours. Yet something about tonight felt different. The glass doors at the entrance suddenly pushed open, ushering in a blast of cold night air. A man staggered inside. His coat was worn, blood soaking through the fabric. One arm pressed hard against his stomach, his breaths shallow. But it wasn't his injury that struck Isabella. It was his eyes. Clear, sharp, strangely alert, nothing like the clouded stare of a man on the brink of collapse. At the reception desk, the middle-aged clerk gave him a long, suspicious look. "Do you have insurance?" she asked flatly. He shook his head. Her lips tightened. "Then you'll need to try County General." "We can't take you here." The man didn't protest. He simply stood there, as though he'd expected this rejection all along. Isabella felt her chest tighten. She had seen this scene repeat too many times. Those with nothing turned away as though they were invisible. She bit her lip, glanced around. No one was paying attention. Before she could second-guess herself, she stepped forward. "Come with me," she said softly, but firmly. The man hesitated, studying her, then followed without a word. She led him into a quiet alcove near the supply room, out of view of the cameras. With practiced hands, she pulled gauze, antiseptic, and fresh bandages from a cabinet. The wound was deep, still bleeding, but nothing she hadn't handled before. As she worked, her eyes caught an old, clean scar running down his arm. A mark too precise, too deliberate for an ordinary drifter. She blinked but said nothing. The man remained silent, watching her with an intensity that unsettled her. When she finished and moved to step back, his hand closed around her wrist. "You're not like the others," he said, his voice low, gravelly. Isabella froze, meeting his gaze. His eyes held no despair, no defeat, only something steady, almost knowing. He gave the faintest smile, released her, and walked away. Not stumbling, not weak, but calm, as though the injury had never existed. A chill ran through Isabella's spine as she watched him disappear into the night. Deep down, something told her their paths were far from finished, and she had no way of knowing that this single act of defiance would alter the course of her life forever. Morning broke. Sunlight poured through the tall hospital windows, casting pale gold onto the marble floors. St. Mercy stirred with its usual chaos, doctors rushing, pages over the intercom, machines beeping in rhythm. But for Isabella, all of it felt strangely far away. Just as her shift ended, a message buzzed on her phone. "Report to the director's office immediately." Her stomach dropped. A sense of dread clung to her as she pushed open the office door. Inside sat Margaret Collins, the hospital's administrator. Impeccably dressed in a gray suit, hair pinned in place, silver glasses gleaming under the desk lamp, Collins was known for her cold efficiency. A woman who placed numbers above people. Without greeting her, Collins turned her monitor around. On the screen, grainy security footage from the night before. Isabella guiding the man into the shadows, opening the supply cabinet, treating him with her own hands. Every detail captured. "Did you think we wouldn't notice?" Collins's voice cut like ice. Isabella's pulse raced, but she forced calm into her voice. "I was trying to save a man's life." Collins raised an eyebrow, as if amused by the answer. "Save a life? Tell me, Nurse Carter, are you unfamiliar with our policies?" "I know them well." "Then you know uninsured patients are not to be treated here." "You broke one of our most critical rules." Heat rose in Isabella's cheeks. "What kind of rule forces us to stand by while someone bleeds out?" "The kind that keeps this hospital afloat," Collins replied sharply. She removed her glasses, her gaze hard. "If everyone acted on their feelings, we'd shut down in months." "This place was built to heal," Isabella shot back, "not to profit." Collins studied her a long moment, then slid a paper across the desk. "This is a formal statement. Sign it. Admit you were wrong. Promise it won't happen again." Isabella stared at the page. Just one signature and this storm would pass. But it meant betraying everything she believed in. It meant saying compassion was a mistake. Flashes of last night returned. The blood, the scar, the strange man's words. You're different. No, she couldn't sign. Collins sighed. You have until the end of the day. Refuse, and termination will be the only option. Isabella turned without a word, leaving the suffocating office. In the hall, a voice called softly. Isabella, she turned. Jamie Dawson, a doctor she trusted, stood there, concern etched into his face. I know you meant well, he said, lowering his voice. But think about yourself. Think about your future before it's too late. Throw it away for someone else. Isabella met his gaze. And if I can't help people, what's the point of my future? Jimmy had no response, no one did. She walked away, leaving him standing there, his face shadowed with doubt, a choice to make back in. The staff lounge. Isabella sat at the stiff wooden table before her. The report lay untouched. The pen rested beside to one signature, and she could keep her job, but at the cost of her own conscience. Outside, the sounds of the ER echoed patients in. Need lives, hanging in the balance. She took a deep breath and slowly closed her eyes. She already knew her answer. She wouldn't sign the air in the staff lounge was suffocating. The report lay on the table before Isabella. Every word on it, a sentence, passed against her. The pen sat beside it, a clear choice, but not an easy one. One signature and she could keep her job. One signature and everything that happened last night would be erased as if it had never existed. But if she signed, she would be admitting she was wrong, admitting that saving a life was something that deserved punishment. And she couldn't do that. She sat there, fingers tightening around the fabric of her white uniform, her thoughts a tangled mess. The homeless man's voice echoed in her mind. You're different. She lifted her head, her gaze steady, slowly. Deliberately, she pushed the report away. She didn't touch the pen. The door swung open. Margaret Collins stood there. Her cold, assessing eyes said she already knew Isabella's. Answer. Have you made your decision? Her voice carried no anger, only certainty about the inevitable outcome. Isabella took a deep breath and rose to her feet. She met Collins's gaze, unwavering. I can't sign for a moment. The room fell deathly silent. Collins narrowed her eyes, then stepped forward, tapping a manicured finger against the table. I hope you understand the consequences of this choice, Nurse Carter. I do. Isabella's voice didn't waver. Collins gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if this response had been expected. Then she straightened, bringing her hand down sharply against the table. Her voice was like a blade. Then you're fired. The words rang out like a final verdict. Cold absolute. No one objected. No one spoke up for her. Isabella stood still, feeling the force of her own heartbeat. But she did not regret her decision. 10 minutes later, she stood before her locker. Gathering the few belongings, she had sticky notes of encouragement from colleagues, photographs from long shifts filled with exhaustion and laughter. Now all of it felt distant around her. Some co-workers watched in silence, saying nothing. Some avoided her gaze as if afraid to be associated with her. Some whispered in hushed voices, too quiet for her to hear. But she already knew what they meant. Isabella Carter once, a respected nurse, now just another failure cast aside by the system. Jimmy Dawson, the young doctor who had warned her, stood nearby. He watched her for a moment, then exhaled and shook. His head, you should have signed, Isabella. She shut her locker with a sharp click and turned to face him. And if I had, how would I be any different from those who turn their backs on patients? Jamie had no answer after a long pause. He simply looked. Away, no one stopped her from leaving. No one said goodbye. Isabella walked out of St. Mercy Hospital alone, unnoticed. But every step she took felt steadier than ever. She had lost everything, but she had kept the one thing that mattered, her conscience. And she knew this was not one door had closed, but another was waiting to open. The hospital doors closed behind Isabella, but the coldness of them clung to her. Her footsteps echoed against the stone pavement, lost in the noise of honking. Cars' hurried heels clicking against the street, and the distant hum of a city that suddenly felt more foreign than ever. Just hours ago, she had been a nurse. She had stood in patient rooms. She had saved lives now. She had nothing the next morning. Isabella awoke with a hollow weight pressing against her chest. She opened her laptop, scrolling through lists of hospitals across the city. Some part of her still believed there had to be a place that needed a nurse like her. A place not entirely. Consumed by cold, rigid policies, she sent applications to Washington Medical, Hopewell Center, Trinity Health hospitals with reputations she once admired, but the day stretched on with no response. Day 2. The first email arrived. Thank you for your application. Unfortunately, this position has been filled. The second, we regret to inform you that we are unable to move forward with your application at this time. The third, due to internal policy considerations, we are unable to proceed with. An interview. Every line on the screen cut deeper into her patience, into her hope. She picked up her phone and dialed Hopewell Center. A familiar voice answered. Dr. Martinez, an old friend. I'm sorry, Isabella. His voice was low, almost guilty. But you can't work here. She froze, already sensing the answer before she asked. Why? A pause, then reluctantly. There's a red flag on your name. They say you have disciplinary issues that you don't respect. Hospital policy. She gripped the phone tighter, anger rising in her chest. So what exactly is your policy, Dr. Martinez, to let patients die on the street because they can't afford care? Isabella. His sigh crackled through the line. I know who you are, but this system, it has no place for people who fight. Against it that night, Isabella tossed her phone aside, feeling like every door had been slammed shut in her face. She opened the medicine cabinet in her small apartment. Inside, gore sutures, scalpel tools she should be using in a hospital right now. Her fingers brushed against them, and she remembered the sensation of stopping a hemorrhage. The look in a patient's eyes when they realized they were going to live. But now all of it was meaningless. If she wasn't a nurse, then what was she? Did this world even need her? She turned on the TV, desperate for a distraction. Instead, the first thing she saw made her freeze. Recent reports show that uninsured patients are being turned away at record high rates. Hundreds of emergency cases rejected every day, leaving many in life-threatening conditions. The footage cut to a homeless man curled up on the pavement, arms wrapped around his stomach, invisible pain. Exactly like that night. Exactly like the man she had saved. She wasn't wrong. She had done the right thing. But then why? Why had everything turned out like this? Isabella shot up from her chair, unable to sit still any longer. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside. The city pulsed around her, neon signs glowing against the night. Skyscrapers towering above with their indifferent lights. People rushed past, absorbed in their own worlds. Not a single one looked at her. Not a single one knew she had lost everything simply because she refused to look away from someone in need. She walked aimlessly, streets blurring together until she stopped across the street. Under the dim glow of a street lamp stood the man, homeless man. She had helped that night, but this time he looked entirely different. No tattered coat, no hollow, desperate gaze. Instead, he wore a sleek black suit, polished leather shoes gleaming under the light. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. She blinked, wondering if exhaustion was playing tricks on her. But no, he was looking straight at her. Then he smiled. T.I. knowing, almost amused smile. He pulled out his phone and pressed a number. A second later, Isabella's phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated, looked down, unknown number. Slowly, she raised the phone to her ear. Hello? A deep, steady voice answered. Miss Carter. I presume she swallowed. Yes, this is her. I imagine you have many questions in time. You will find the answers, and when that moment comes, you'll know where to find me." The line went dead. Isabella's head snapped up, but the man was gone, vanished into the sea of people. She stood frozen in the middle of the city, her pulse pounding. Who was he? Who was he really? Pieces of a puzzle were falling into place, but the full picture remained hidden. She didn't know who he was, but she knew one thing she was going to find out. 2 weeks passed. Isabella still couldn't find a job. Every hospital turned her away. No explanations were given, but she understood her name was on a blacklist every morning. She opened her inbox only to find another rejection. Every night she stared at her medicine cabinet, wondering if everything she had believed in still meant anything. What had she fought? For if in the end, no one cared. Ring, ring. The sharp ring of her phone shattered the silence. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Isabella hesitated, but somehow she knew she had to pick up Miss Carter, a deep, steady voice. "Who is this? I need to see you right now. St. Mercy Hospital." Her breath caught YS Mercy, but the line went dead. She gripped the phone tighter. That hospital had thrown her away. Now they wanted to see her. St. Mercy looked the same. Bright lights, endless movement, but it no longer belonged to her familiar faces, glanced at her as she passed. Some whispered, some looked away. She ignored them, reaching the director's office. She took a deep breath. Then she pushed the door open, and in that moment, her world tilted. The homeless man from that night sat before her, but he was no longer wearing rags. He wore a sharp black suit, a Rolex glinting under the office lights. She couldn't speak. You, the man, smiled, voice calm, composed. "You came." Her gaze flickered to the nameplate on the desk. Ethan Walker, Chief Executive Officer. Her chest tightened. No, that's not possible. Ethan leaned back, watching her with cool amusement. "I just bought this hospital." Her heart pounded. Why, Ethan stood pouring himself a glass of whiskey, eyes distant. "Because I was once in your position." She narrowed her eyes. Doubt crept into her voice. "Who are you really?" Ethan sat down his glass, locking eyes with her. "I'm offering you a chance." He pulled a file from his desk and slid it toward her. "I need someone to lead community health care. I want you to take that position." The air in the room thickened. A chance, an escape, a turning point that could change everything. But could she trust this? The air in the room was heavy. Ethan Walker's offer still echoed in Isabella's mind. "I want you to lead a new initiative, this hospital's community health division. No one will be turned away just because they're poor." She glanced down at the file on the desk, a chance to return, but in a way she had never imagined. But there was a condition. Ethan folded his arms, his gaze sharp, unwavering. "You have to come back to this hospital and prove to them that the system can change." The words hit Isabella like a blow. She turned toward the window. Outside, the hospital continued to function as it always had. Nurses she once worked with moved through the halls. Collins was probably still in her office, convinced that Isabella had been erased from the game for good. Go back to St. Mercy, return to the place that had cast her out, ruined her reputation, discarded her without hesitation. A tightness formed in her chest. "I don't know if I can." Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching her closely. Then he spoke slow and deliberate. "Then they've already won." The room turned suffocatingly silent. Isabella stiffened. She murmured. Ethan nodded, his eyes piercing through her hesitation. "Collins, the administration, the ones who believe profit matters more than human lives, they think you've been crushed, that you'll never fight back, and if you don't take this offer, they'll be right." Her hands curled into fists. Collins, the nurses who turned their backs on her, everyone who dismissed her, believing she was just another disposable pawn. She had thought she had lost everything, but no. She still had a choice. The only question was, did she have the courage to fight this war? Images flashed through her mind, vivid as if replaying on a screen. the homeless man refused treatment patients, slipping away into the night unnoticed, uncared for the news report about those abandoned by the system. She took a slow breath, turning back to Ethan. "If I do this," her voice was quiet but firm, "will I have full control over this initiative?" A flicker of approval crossed Ethan's face. "Of course I didn't choose you to be a puppet." She hesitated for only a second more, then nodded, her resolve hardening. "I'll do it." Ethan smiled, but before he could say anything, Isabella placed both hands on the desk, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "But I won't return as someone they can control. I'm coming back to change this hospital, whether the system wants it or not." She held Ethan's gaze unwavering. "I will fight." Ethan's expression didn't shift, but something flickered in his eyes, an amused glint, a spark of intrigue. Then slowly, he nodded. "Welcome back, Director Carter." Dawn broke over St. Mercy Hospital. Golden sunlight streamed through the towering glass windows, casting a brilliant glow over the building. Isabella Carter had returned, but this time she was no longer the discarded nurse, no longer an outsider to the system today. She would not bow her head. The revolving glass doors spun slowly as Isabella stepped inside. The hospital was the same, busy, crowded, relentless, but the atmosphere had shifted. Her former colleagues recognized her. The first look, shock. The second, uncertainty. Whispers spread like wildfire through the halls. No way she actually came back. Collins is going to lose it. Isabella didn't care. She walked with steady purpose, each step carving its presence into the polished hospital floor gleamed under the overhead lights when, less than 2 minutes later, the administrator's office door opened with force. Margaret Collins stepped out. Her high, perfectly coiled bun mirrored her personality, unyielding. Her tailored gray suit was sharp and her eyes cut like a scalpel. But this time, her piercing look wasn't enough to shake Isabella. Collins marched toward her, voice frosted with authority but edged with surprise. "What are you doing here?" Isabella didn't flinch. She held her ground, meeting Collins's stare directly. A calm, confident smile touched her lips. "I don't work for you anymore, Ms. Collins." The administrator froze for the briefest second before her expression hardened. "Then why are you here?" Isabella's fingers brushed over the new badge clipped neatly to her coat. The title glimmered. Director of Community Health. Gasps echoed down the corridor. Staff members whispered to each other, eyes wide. Director of Community Health? Wasn't she fired? What's going on? Collins's face paled, though she quickly tried to mask it. "That role doesn't exist in our system," she snapped. Isabella's smile grew sharper, her eyes steady with defiance. "It does now." She pulled a folder from her bag and set it in front of Collins. The bold heading read, "Appointment Decree, Director of Community Health." Beneath it, the signature of Ethan Walker, Chairman of the Board. The corridor erupted with murmurs. Collins's composure slipped for the first time. Her iron grip on power rattled. Her arms folded tightly across her chest, and she forced her voice into steel. "Do you honestly think a title will allow you to overturn decades of policy?" Isabella stepped closer, her tone unwavering. "This hospital abandoned the people who needed us most. We let them suffer. We let them die. That ends now." Collins gave a short, brittle laugh, trying to disguise the tension in her eyes. "You're naive, Carter. One position won't topple an entire system." "I'm not doing this alone," Isabella replied. Her gaze drifted over the doctors and nurses gathered around them. Some had looked away from her on the day she was fired, but now their expressions were different. Respect, belief. A young doctor gave her a firm nod. A nurse smiled, quietly hopeful. She wasn't alone anymore. Turning back, Isabella's voice rang clear and sharp. "Call me naive if you like. But starting today, I'm the one leading, and this hospital will change, whether you approve or not." Anger flickered in Collins' eyes, but this time she had no ground to stand on. Isabella walked past her, victory surging in her chest. Still, she knew this was just the opening move. The real war had only begun. 1 year later, the grand auditorium of St. Mercy Hospital was alive with anticipation. Hundreds of nursing students sat forward in their seats, their faces glowing with excitement and nerves. The spotlight fell on the podium, where Isabella Carter now stood. She still wore her white coat, but no one saw her as just another nurse anymore. She was the director of community health, the woman who had redefined the hospital in a single year. The program she founded had saved countless uninsured patients. Policies once thought immovable had been rewritten. The culture of St. Mercy had shifted from cold profit to compassionate care. It hadn't been easy. Collins fought her, the board resisted, but Isabella prevailed, one battle at a time. Now she stood before the next generation, ready to pass the torch. "There were nights when I thought I'd made a mistake," she began, her voice warm yet steady. The hall fell silent. "When I lost my job, when every door slammed shut, when I was dismissed and forgotten, I asked myself if it was worth it." She paused, letting the silence carry the weight of her words. "But then I realized doing the right thing will never be easy, and it doesn't need to be noticed." Heads nodded. A quiet ripple of agreement moved through the room. "We don't serve patients for recognition. We don't save lives for applause. We act out of compassion simply because it's the right thing to do." Applause built, then thundered across the hall. Isabella's eyes swept across the crowd of young nurses, their gazes alight with determination. They were the future, and they would carry her vision further than she could alone. "If you have the courage to believe in what's right," she concluded, her voice firm, "you can change the world." The hall erupted. Applause thundered, echoing with hope. Stepping down from the podium, Isabella's heart felt both proud and peaceful. She glanced toward the back of the hall. Ethan Walker stood there, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable, but his eyes held quiet pride. He gave a small nod. No words were necessary. She understood. Isabella smiled faintly and turned away. She had never sought validation, but in that moment, she knew her path was true.